So I know you've done a lot of work with and consulted with Apple. Let's make this more concrete. Tell me
Sure.
about Apple and what it means.
Sure. Well, Apple has a really interesting formula. We're not quite sure where this formula came from, but it's certainly a formula that has survived the demise of Steve Jobs. The formula is pretty simple. If you take the first part of the formula, what Apple will always do is they will do something sustaining. They'll do something that other firms are doing. Fundamentally, they'll make a piece of hardware. They'll make a phone, they'll make an iPod, they'll make an MP3 player, they'll make a computer. But that computer will be different from everybody else. And it's different because of two fundamental differentiation vectors that Apple believes in. One is ease of use, and the other is industrial design, the look and feel of the product. So even when Apple does something that is sustaining, they will make sure that it still is unique. The second part of the formula is Apple will always do something reframing. They will find an overlooked or underserved need in a market, a customer problem or a customer aspiration, and they will solve that problem or aspiration. And they will introduce that as a core part of the value proposition. So if you think about an MP3 player, they had an iPod. It was a piece of hardware, but the fundamental problem with iPod users or MP3 player users was, how do I access the content? How do I download the content? How do I organize the content? How do I sync the content? And how do I do all of that without going to jail? Because prior to iTunes, we were doing peer-to-peer file sharing, and that was essentially illegal. So there was an overlooked, underserved need. Apple found it, addressed it, built the ecosystem of iTunes, and now that's the dominant platform that people use to get their content. Then came the phone. And of course, with the phone, there were both problems and aspirations that were not being served. The problem was we don't want to carry two phones. We don't want to carry one for business, one for pleasure. We just want one that does it all. We want access to our computing on a mobile environment. And we want the phone to be more than a phone. We want it to do other things. We want it to be a personal device. And a lot of those problems were solved through, of course, the App Store, which is now the real customization platform that people use to make the device meaningful and relevant to their own lives. So you look at Apple's formula in a category, and you'll see that they're doing both sustaining and reframing at the same time. Then they'll overlay the third part of the platform. The third part of the platform is a unique customer experience. If you go into the standard Apple store, you'll see that that's unlike any other retail experience at all. And then finally, they'll roll all of that up in a clearly defined brand, image and reputation, which essentially stands for the word cool, right?
So I want to hear more about their customers, because
Sure.
as you know, Apple started with very niche kind of
Sure.
customer loyalists, and it grew. And I know you've talked about happy prisoners. Talk about how they've been able to expand their brand with their customer base.
Sure. The goal of innovation ultimately, if you think about why we even bother to innovate, we're obviously innovating for a business purpose, right? We're not doing it just because it's interesting to do. There has to be a business result. So if you look at innovation closely and you try and find the link through to business results, you can find a very strong link between innovation and customer loyalty. Innovation is a source of competitive advantage. Competitive advantage is a source of customer loyalty. So it's important to understand what kind of loyalty we're talking about. There's a lot written about that. But one of the main distinctions is we try to identify the difference between customers who are passive and active. We have customers coming back, some of them are passive, others are active. When you look at somebody like Apple, they're targeting attitudinal loyalty. They're targeting these active supporters of their business, the happy prisoners. And you'll have people who are not Apple users, and they'll look at the Apple system and they'll say that's a closed system, and the customer is captive to that system, and the customer has very little choice about how they can modify that system. But that's being done for a reason. It's being done to give the customer a unique experience, which is relevant to them, that drives the advocacy. So when you look at Apple's loyalty scores, you will find that they are at the top of the category in every category that they're in terms of advocates and attitudinally loyal customers. And those scores are around 70 to 75% of the Apple customer base would be in that state of loyalty. But the important thing to realize is that that loyalty is only created through a particular kind of innovation. It's only created through innovation that is reframing and shows the customer a new way of solving their problems or fulfilling their aspirations. And it's only done through innovation that is unique. Innovation that differentiates you from everybody else and gives the customer a reason to talk about you and a reason to be a happy prisoner.
So just delving a little bit deeper into that, so if you were to juxtapose what Apple did with, say, BlackBerry, I mean, trying to get a sense of where one succeeds and another fails.
Sure. Well, it's quite interesting because BlackBerry actually had the loyalty in the smartphone business for a very long period of time, but they thought about that device as in a very narrow fashion. So the device was a phone and an email device and a messaging device. And it was providing a very specific outcome, which was secure email in a corporate environment. Of course, that meant if you were working in a corporation or in a business, you had to have a separate phone to do all your non-business stuff. And I think Apple recognized that problem and BlackBerry didn't. Or if they did recognize it, they didn't do anything about it. So they began to lose loyalty. They began to lose their strong customer loyalty, first in North America and then globally. And I think they found it very, very difficult to challenge the assumptions. Even when they were pushed to fundamentally rethink the role of BlackBerry and the design of BlackBerry, they were still tied to their existing core competencies and assets. They were tied to their global captive server network, which is what they use to send these secure emails around the world. And they found it very difficult to think outside of that set of core competencies. So another challenge in innovation is this concept of core competencies where managers and leaders believe that core competencies are necessary and will protect the firm forever. And what we learn from innovation is that nothing lasts forever, not even the firm's core competencies. And so you see examples of that in companies like Microsoft, where today there's new core competencies in search, in mobile, in cloud, in content, and those core competencies have been developed by somebody else first. So if you're the incumbent, you can probably see them, but it's actually quite hard to reverse engineer those competencies and regain the lead.